to the Encore Podcast.
So welcome to the Encore Podcast with myself, Rob McConnell. My next guest is a renowned scientist. He is the head of health data at the Queen's University of Belfast. He is, in fact, Mr. Mark Lawler. Mark, how are you?
I'm delighted to be here, Rob. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Yeah, delighted to have you. Really good. What do you think of the Encore Podcast studio?
Brilliant. I love it. It's just really cool, and it's great that you see the waterfront is behind us as well. It looks really well.
So, Mark, before we dive into your subject matter in terms of cancer data and health data, etc., and everything you've achieved, can we maybe talk a little bit, taking things back, when you were a boy? So tell us a little bit about where it all started.
Yeah, no, I was probably a fairly shy boy, actually, just given that I'm not that shy now, as people who know me know. And I suppose my interest in science was piqued by my father, who wasn't an academic or anything like that, but was interested in nature particularly. So we used to go down to the canal, and actually I had a aquarium, but it wasn't an aquarium with tropical fish. It was an aquarium with things that we caught in the canal, water boatmen, water beetles, etc. So I had this aquarium in my room, but it was totally self-made, if you like. So that was great fun. So that probably started my interest. And then I would have gone to a few sort of science fairs or things like that, or whatever they were at the time. And that sort of piqued my interest in science and that sort of curiosity and knowledge type of thing.
So you didn't stumble into science as such. It was more that passion.
I probably always knew that I was interested in it, and then I did my undergraduate in Trinity. And one of the things is I believe a lot in coincidence. Mm-hmm. And for example, I went to Trinity not knowing it was the only place in Ireland at the time that you could get a genetics degree. So that was just me going to Trinity because I wanted to have fun in the university in the centre of a city. But it turned out to be a very, a positive choice because it ended up then obviously setting my career in motion. And
you're up in Belfast now, or are you spending most of your time?
No, I'm in Belfast. I've been here 13 years. I work here during the week. I come down to Dublin for the weekends, all right, but I'm a Belfast boy.
So a regular commuter then?
I use
on the Enterprise
a lot. Yeah.
The staff on that would know you very well, I'd say.
I could probably drive the train.
Early starts on a Monday morning and back sort of
Friday evening,
that
type of thing, yeah.
And down there, you're based yourself in one of the hospitals?
No. I'm just purely, I live with my wife down there at the weekends and then work here during the week. No, I'm just in Queens.
Yes, very good. And so, was there somebody in particular, if we go back, that saw something in you maybe before you did, in terms of, the domain that you've gone into?
Yeah, I mean, probably two people. One was George Dawson, who was my professor, head of department in genetics in Trinity in undergrad, and he saw something in me, and also he awakened an interest not only in science and curiosity, but also in art. So I'm big into art, and it was through actually him that I became that, because he was a big art collector and also went to a lot of exhibitions, so I went with him. I mean, the other person who really influenced me was my uncle John. And he was a community leader, and I suppose he instilled in me that equality, and a lot of the work I do is in relation to addressing cancer inequalities, and I think it was from him that I picked that up, that all people were equal and should be treated the same, and we've tried to do that in the research that we've done over the last 15-20 years as well.
So of all the things that you could have went into, maybe why cancer? What was the
I think again, lucky. Started my PhD, was working more in the genetics area of things, and then my PhD supervisor Peter Humphreys met a clinical doctor, Sean McCann, who was into hematological malignancies, and so they naturally sort of then said, well, we've got this guy, he's interested in doing research, and so that sort of brought me into the cancer field, if you like, whereas obviously I'd started more in the pure genetics field. So that was, I'm really grateful to both of them, because that really set up my career.
And has spending your life around cancer changed the way you live your life?
Yeah, it's a good question. You tend to be more aware in relation to diet, in relation to exercise. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Nobody is. But it probably does make you think a little bit differently and be a little bit more aware of yourself and your mortality, I guess, as well. It's and obviously the fact as well that 1 in 2 people are affected with cancer. Everybody will know somebody in their family or friends with cancer, so it's very much out there. So in that way, I think you need to be aware of it and take good care of yourself if you can.
And if we were going back 30 years ago and people having conversations about, you were having conversations about somebody with cancer, how is that different today?
Well, unfortunately, it would have been a very difficult conversation 30, 40 years ago, because in a lot of situations you'd be saying, well, we can do something to maybe ease your pain, but we can't really cure the disease. And so it probably was a situation, certainly in some leukemias, for example, some of the adult leukemias, and that it was almost a death sentence. And that was obviously very difficult conversations to have, and also for the family as well as for the individual, difficult to take. So, I think, the progress we've made in the last, 40 years, particularly initially in childhood cancers, but then subsequently in other cancers, has been significant. We still have a lot of challenges, but I think if you look back, we've come a long way.
But would you say we're winning the battle?
I think we are. I think one of the challenges is that cancer isn't a single disease. It's actually probably 100 different diseases. And so whereas we're good at treating some cancers, other ones we're not so good at. But if you look at something like lung cancer, where I would have said there was no treatments for it 5 years ago, now we've got probably about 20 different treatments for lung cancer. So that shows you that by actually concentrating on research, doing research, finding out new things, but then applying it, and that's the most important thing. And that's really what I've made my career on. It's not been just knowing it for esoteric reasons. It's how can I use it then to actually drive change, whether that be new diagnostics, new therapeutics, new policy. More recently, I've gotten much more into that policy area because I see opportunities to change things.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in a little while, because that's really interesting. Some of those, the evidence that you've come up with that's allowed us to change policy, which is, we will touch on that. But you mentioned their lung cancer and extraordinary progress in that. What other cancers have you seen sort of extraordinary progress on?
I suppose childhood leukemia is one where we've gone from a stage where we were only able to treat maybe 50% to nearly 90% we can treat successfully. Breast cancer is a good example. I think as well you're seeing things like colorectal cancer or bowel cancer. But then we have challenges in something like pancreatic cancer, where we still, it's a very difficult disease to treat. We do have some successes. And again, they're just at the American Society of Clinical Oncology Conference in June in Chicago. There was an announcement in relation to a new breakthrough. And I was in the room and everybody just stood up and cheered.
Wow.
It was amazing. And this is all, doctors and healthcare.
The significance was
so great. Was so great. So even in a disease like pancreatic cancer, which is difficult, and unfortunately a lot of people die of it, partially because it's only diagnosed usually at the late stage where it's much more difficult to treat. But even in that, we're starting to see changes. So I'm very optimistic, but obviously it's still a challenge of, if we're looking at the general, we can be optimistic, but obviously you can have a situation as an individual person where the treatment doesn't work, and obviously that's very sad and very disappointing, but that just makes you more determined to try and look at ways in which we can treat all cancers in all people.
And is that the one that frightens you the most in terms of where not enough progress has been made, or are there others that you would stand out to you?
I would have said pancreatic cancer, and then some of those rarer cancers as well, esophageal cancer, although there's been some progress in that as well. And it's again, sometimes it's certain forms of sort of colorectal cancer, for example, are easier to treat than others, because you find now that genetics or genomics has actually made them different types of pancreatic cancer, different types of colon cancer, and knowing that allows you then to think, well, what particular treatment, how can I target a particular treatment to that form of pancreatic, esophageal, etc.
And what sort of misconceptions do you think would the public have that you see, the biggest sort of misconceptions about cancer?
I think sometimes it's in relation to it tends to be the individual thing. My grandmother smoked and drank until she was 90, and she lived until she was 90, so therefore and sometimes you have to try and say yes, but I can give you 100 other examples where that wasn't the case. I think the other thing is recognizing that diet is important. The other thing is prevention. It's, I think, ridiculous that we have a scenario now in Europe where we only spend 4% of our cancer research budget on prevention and only 4% of the research effort. So that doesn't really make any sense to me, Because obviously, if we can prevent it, you not only prevent the disease, but we also means that people don't have to go through all the treatments that they would have to go through if you've already caught the cancer before it actually got to the stage of needing to be treated.
So if you had a magic wand,
prevention would be, I'd be I don't know if I was
you would
for health, I'd be saying
you would focus
there.
So Mark, do you think money is the problem or capacity?
Well, personally, I don't think money is the issue. I think obviously you need money and you need resource, but we spend a lot of money not achieving best outcomes, and that's really critical. So we need better leadership. We need to decide how we spend the money. So it's not what you spend, it's how you spend it, what you focus on, how do you get the quick wins, and how do you make sure that what you're doing actually delivers. It's no use having a great cancer strategy sitting up on the shelf and not being implemented. And unfortunately, and it's not just in Northern Ireland, but that implementation part of things is actually a European-wide problem. We don't implement. We do things very well. I sometimes say we do great breakthrough, but not so good follow-through. And one of the things we did was said, okay, well, let's develop something that actually recognises the rights of patients, because I feel that's really important, that you should have a right to the best cancer care. So what we did was we developed something called the European Code of Cancer Practice, and it identifies what cancer patients should expect from their health system. And that's really critical, because if you know what you expect from your health system, if the health system is mandated to provide that, then that's a win-win situation for everyone.
And you were awarded?
We were really thrilled to be awarded the 2018. The work happened in 2014, and then in 2018 we received the European Health Award, which is specifically for work that's had Europe-wide impact. And so it's great as well to be sort of hitting for Northern Ireland on the big stage. And again, we do punch above our weight. But that was really a recognition of a lot of people. That's the other thing I'd just emphasise, is that this area, whether it be research or policy, it's very much a team sport working together. Individuals sitting in ivory towers of the universities that doesn't happen anymore and can't be successful anywhere. You have to work together, and by working together is the way in which you actually beat cancer.
Well, congratulations to yourself and the team around that. Needless to say, everybody appreciates that. Not everybody sees that work, obviously. What does it feel like to get those sort of accolades for yourself?
I think it's really important in terms of it recognises that what we're doing must make sense and must be on I think as well, I'm a big believer in going out to bat for Northern Ireland, and I think that's really important, because sometimes people say, oh well, what are they doing there? They're just a little small country at the western edge of Europe. And I'm saying, no, we punch above our weight and we can deliver. You give us the opportunity, you give us the resources, we can deliver. And as well as that, I think it's meant that people look at Northern Ireland and say, yeah, they're saying they're doing what they say in cancer research and in cancer care. But we need to do more. And as I said, the other important thing obviously is it's all very well getting these accolades internationally, but what's most important to me is what happens to cancer patients in Northern Ireland.
And seeing the direct impact in that is amazing. So theoretical situation, if you were the health minister and you were being given that position and you had a 5-year run in front of you, what might be the few things that you would focus on?
I would focus on early diagnosis. So if we can diagnose cancer early, we can actually treat it with the treatments we already have quite successfully. But it has to be both. So it can't be just early diagnosis, because if it's just early diagnosis, you identify it earlier, but if you don't do anything about it, it doesn't help the patient. So I think that's really important. And I think the other area is prevention. And I think things like looking at lung cancer screening. I think the evidence is there that we can do that. And the important thing is that lung cancer screening will not only help you with lung cancer, but will actually help you with lung health. So if you think of other things, COPD, other lung-related illnesses, and I think sometimes what we realise is that what we do in cancer can also have applications in other areas. And I think again that's a win-win situation. And the other thing is I'd make people accountable. And I wouldn't be afraid to do that, because we need to make people accountable. And I think, personally, that we should actually have, the person's right is to get care, best possible care. And if they're not getting that best possible care, then what are we doing about it? And Denmark is a great example of this. So what Denmark say is, if you are not getting treatment in your particular region or area, we will provide that treatment elsewhere. And that might involve paying for you to go outside the country. But it's accountability. And if we don't have accountability, we have cancer waiting times and lists in terms of on targets. We've never made the target. So what's the point in having a target if you're not actually making it? So there needs to be some way to actually force people to actually realise targets.
I love that word, accountability, and it doesn't matter what field or discipline you're in, or what organisation or what business or what domain. Accountability is of the essence.
Absolutely, and it should be part of everything we do. It shouldn't even be. Sometimes when I say it and people look at me and I'm saying this should be just part of what we do. Yeah, it's not a big sort of new idea or anything like that, but it's very much accountability and leadership are the two things that I think we need to deliver much more.
Let's turn to legislation. So you've worked very hard around this concept of what's known as the right to be forgotten, and that's really around financial legislation so that people are not discriminated against that have had cancer from a financial perspective. Tell us a bit about that.
This has been one of my big sort of things over the last 5 years. So 5 years ago, realised that cancer patients or cancer survivors who'd survived cancer were being discriminated against in relation to access to mortgages. And this was people who were 5 years or more post-successful treatment. So my argument would be they're cured of their disease. And I, up to recently, chaired the International Cancer Benchmarking Partnership. And that's what we did. We looked at outcomes and we looked at how do we know somebody is now cured of their disease. And we had that 5-year sort of benchmark, if you like, in relation to that. But what we found was, and this was work we did with the Irish Cancer Society in the Republic of Ireland, was that cancer survivors were, one, finding it very difficult to get quotes for a mortgage, two, not getting access to mortgage insurance, and three, having problems in relation to travel insurance. And I was saying, I can't believe this. I just was...
It's astounding.
And so what we did was we then looked at this in different countries in Europe. We published a couple of key sort of papers that showed the evidence, and then we sort of looked to see, well, how can we influence the Irish Parliament first to change this and actually to introduce new legislation. We deliberately went not through the health or the Department of Health, but we went through the Department of Finance because we felt that was the best way to achieve success. And so what we did was we presented the evidence, we presented it in the Leinster House, the Irish Parliament, we presented it directly to the Minister. I went in and met him and presented the data. And one of the things that was a real success was not only did we get them to say, yes, we're going to introduce this into legislation, but also they were thinking about a 7 or a 10-year gap after treatment. We said no, 5, and I presented the data to show 5. And to be fair to the Minister Troy, he actually listened to us and he said, okay, well, that actually makes sense and you have the evidence. So that's what he went with. So on the 8th of July this year, so just gone in the last month, the Irish Parliament passed a law to say cancer patients cannot be discriminated against based on their previous diagnosis. So they don't have to, once they're 5 years post-successful treatment, they don't have to reveal their cancer diagnosis, and insurance companies or other financial institutions can't ask for if they had a previous cancer.
That's amazing.
Diagnosis.
That's amazing progress.
To be honest, to me, it's been the proudest professional achievement that I've ever done.
Wow.
And I was delighted. And again, it was the work of a lot of people working together. And the other thing is, yeah, we've done that, but now the next step is Northern Ireland.
I was going to say...
So we've already started working with Cancer Focus Northern Ireland, who've been very much taking a lead in this. And what we're going to do is not only do it in Northern Ireland, but do it right across the UK. So again, leadership from Northern Ireland, showing other people how to do it right.
Love it, Mark. I love your determination around that as well. You're certainly passionate about it, and I was going to actually ask you that question, but you've beat me to it, which is surely that must be one of your highlights of a 30-year career in this space.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's probably the thing I'm most proud of. I mean, there are other things we've done and some things we've done that haven't worked as well, so it hasn't all been rosy. But I just think this, and the fact that it makes a big difference to people, and to people who shouldn't have to go through something. It's tough enough having to go through cancer, successfully be treated, be 5 years or more out and then find that you've got the second, or you're almost being penalised twice for an original cancer diagnosis. Again, not acceptable.
There is a lot of bureaucracy out there because, in recent times I've read around, people who are diagnosed even terminally not being able to get access to pensions and things to financially support that process. And I know now that's, in Westminster, that's a topic of conversation and they're pushing that through. But you have all this sort of bureaucracy and red tape, and the pragmatist in me thinks, and probably yourself, like, how do we get rid of this?
Yeah, well, I mean, COVID is a great example of how we actually got rid of a lot of the red tape. So if you look at it, in order to, first of all, diagnose whether you had COVID or not, so we needed some sort of diagnostic, we had to essentially look at ways in which we could change the rules, not be so prescriptive in terms of using data, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to develop a diagnostic. Similarly, in relation to developing the vaccine, again, we had to reduce the sort of personal data rules to allow us to do that. I've looked at all the data from all around the world. There was no incidence of a data breach or a data leak in relation to that. So there's an example of something that we were doing, and then when we had to change because there was no other choice, we actually found that probably we were being too restrictive in terms of where we were in relation to data. I'm not saying data privacy is very important, but we need to sort of have a proportionate response. And I think that's what COVID showed us. It showed us that actually having a much more proportionate response so that we actually do things that make a difference. And yes, we need to be aware of data privacy, but I would suggest we were, and particularly in the Republic of Ireland, where the General Data Protection Regulation is actually interpreted very conservatively, very narrowly. And I think that's having an impact. And the thing that I find, I work a lot with patient advocates, and there's one great patient advocate, she's a breast cancer survivor, and she said to me, and I quote it fairly frequently, what's this, you're not using our data? We thought you were using our data. Why aren't you using our data? Rather than the approach of saying, oh, well, no, I don't want my data to be used for anything. It's really important in terms of research, in terms of care, that we have proportionate approach to using data.
And you're the Professor of Health Data at Queen's University. It's an interesting title, and obviously with the advancement of AI needs data. It needs large language models. It needs a number of things. It's interesting that technology is playing that huge part. So I guess, when we think about where AI has got to, if we strip back all the hype, what is it going to mean, or what is it meaning for somebody who's been diagnosed?
Yeah, well, we're already seeing, yes, I mean, there is AI hype there, no doubt about it, and obviously you hear it a lot in the media at the moment, but there, in the backbone of that, there are things that are really helping us in terms of looking at, for example, radiology images and being able to identify particular changes, and also pathology, so in terms of helping us to diagnose earlier. And I think what you'll see as well is it'll be used a lot in the sort of, to actually sort of take something that's definitely negative, definitely not a cancer, and allow you to do that so that then the pathologist or the radiologist can spend more time focusing on the difficult cases where it needs their skill and interpretation.
But could we reach a point, or are we reaching a point where AI could be detecting cancer before my doctor detects it, for example?
I think we will come to that. I think we have some evidence. I think one of the things that's still challenging is the AI model is only as good as the data that's used to actually make it. And so in that way, I think we still need to be careful. But certainly we're seeing, I think, enough evidence that this is going to play a significant part in how we both diagnose and treat cancer over the next 10 years.
And from a data perspective, a lot of people listening to this might think, so the data in the health service in Northern Ireland, it's being sort of captured and it's being analysed. I'm assuming that you're crossing boundaries and territories with that data. So is that data being pulled across different regions? Or
we're in a really exciting era at the moment for cancer data and health data in general in Northern Ireland, because the Encompass system has essentially meant that every person in Northern Ireland on their phone has access to their health record. This is going to make a huge difference, both now but also in the future, in terms of using that data, in terms of researching, in terms of identifying patients who will be suitable for particular clinical trials. It's a huge opportunity for us. It's really a digital transformation. And the other thing it'll do, and we've already shown this with work that we've done with the London Care Record, is not only will it allow us to do things more efficiently, but it'll also potentially address some of the challenges we have in relation to workforce. So we have a workforce crisis at the moment, and some of that, I'm not saying all of it, but some of that can be helped by digitalization of health data and using different algorithms then to actually detect. And what we've found is that actually not only do you save money and efficiency, you also save them time, the time of healthcare professionals, so that they can then not be tied up in red tape and, for example, making a phone call and waiting an hour to actually find out what's in the notes of the particular patient, when they should be able to get that, just instantly on their computer or on their phone. So I think we're in a exciting time, and I think Northern Ireland is extremely well placed to actually be able to lead in this area going forward, which is really exciting. That
really is exciting. We're delighted to hear that. Somebody who has been touched by cancer in the last year, my father passed away last October with stomach cancer, so very pertinent, and makes this conversation a lot more relevant for me, interesting. But I think
absolutely, Rob, and again, I've said this to you before, but obviously my greatest sympathies to you. But I think it is, as you say, I think that. And again, one of the things just to emphasize is, behind every piece of data, there's a patient, there's a family member. And I think, one of the things I find is you can never forget that. Yeah. You have to really make sure that you're thinking that way. Yes, you're using the data to help, but it's recognizing it's a gift from the person in relation to their data to help us to either do better research or to implement particular things.
Yeah, no, that's a nice way to look at it. And do you think with AI and also, the advent of DNA technology, is it possible, do you think, that we'll get to a point where through, say, for example, my DNA, that doctors will be able to predict what I'm most likely to get in terms of...
I think certainly you're going to see a lot more. I mean, I think we still have some challenges with some of the risk prediction algorithms. I think we're not perfect at the moment, but certainly there's a lot of work. We're involved in a program with Cambridge University in relation to that risk prediction, not only in cancer, but also in cardiovascular disease. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that type of approach, and what is your risk profile and how can that be changed by your environment, by your, what you do in relation to exercise, what foods you eat, what things you avoid, etc.
Yes.
So I think that's it. You're certainly going to see a lot more of that sort of population health type approach.
So we understand the power of data, the role of data and big data at that, huge amounts of data, systems, large language models that can process this. Let's talk about ethics and trust around having that data. I mean, that's a huge domain in itself, isn't it, Mark?
Completely. And one of my principles, and it's one that we've emphasised in a lot of the work we do, is what we call fair value. So you can think about it in terms of there being four main players, if you like, in this area. One is the patient. Second is the healthcare professional or our health system. The third is the researcher, and the fourth is industry. And there may be others that sort of, but I would have said they're the four. And if you have a particular piece of work that you're doing that involves all of those four, you have to make sure that it's proportionate in relation to everybody gets value from it. So if for example, the industry are getting all the value, it's not going to work, and it shouldn't work. And if it's all the hospital, so it needs to be that, and it's getting back to what I was saying about partnerships. And so it's really that fair value principle, that everything we do in this area should be underpinned by a fair value principle that recognises each partner in this approach, this cooperation, but also recognises the trust issue. One of the things we did was back a good few years ago now, there was Cambridge Analytica scandal a number of years ago, probably about 10-15 years ago, you may remember. Where data was essentially being harvested without people's knowledge. And one of the things we did was we said, because as a community we were finding it very difficult, because everybody was saying, oh well, you're just like Cambridge Analytica, and I was saying, well we're not, but we needed to. So I brought together, if you like, a coalition of the willing, We published a roadmap in terms of what we needed to do to restore people's trust. Because it wasn't that we had done anything, but the trust it doesn't necessarily need to be you that makes the breach in relation to trust. If anybody does, then it has impacts on everybody else. And so one of the things we set out very clearly was, this is our roadmap, this is how we should do it, and this is how we are doing it, and these are the breaks and differences that we have put in place to make sure that something like that can never happen. And it's always important that we recognise that we need to keep those principles. So those fair value principles, making sure that we're actually respecting the data that's provided as a gift to us.
Brilliant, really interesting. I mean, that whole area of trust and ethics and responsible AI as well is so fascinating. I suppose if we just turn to the human aspect of it, and somebody gets those words from their doctor, I'm sorry, you have cancer. What are they entitled to expect, from that point on, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think they're entitled to expect, proper care, optimal care, access to treatment, and then also when the treatment is successful, that supportive care is provided to them. And I think we're failing cancer patients if we can't provide all aspects there. So obviously, if you had the diagnosis, because that's why the clinician has talked to you, has said you have cancer. And the other thing is information. It's really important that people are given accurate information so that they can make choices themselves in concert with the clinician. I don't believe in the doctor telling the patient what to do. I think it's a joint decision, and the doctor will provide some of the information, or the healthcare professional, but I think it needs to be that joint decision. But the other thing that's really important is making sure that you're the best available options, that you know about them. I think we should be having league tables in relation to what hospitals are providing, what care, how they're doing. If we're in any other aspect of society, we make choices based on, we look at something and say, they tick the box in relation to various things. Why shouldn't hospitals be the same? But I think it's really important that we make sure that we're providing the optimal approach, and that patients have a right to know. That's why we developed the sort of code of cancer practice, because we wanted to see this is what people should expect from their health system. This is what the health system should aspire to.
And I think it's also how you relay that information, because certainly from my own experiences, it's a lot of information to take in. Yeah. When you get all, like, I've seen the information that's provided at that point, certainly to my father, and it's overwhelming. Yeah. And it's, what are the ways, apart from sitting and reading through it all? And some people will be like, well, I don't even want to look at that. But at least the information is being provided, and you can decide to look at it, and the family can look at it and digest it, and then decide how, at least they're educated then about what it is, what the process is ahead of them, what their options are, how they then treat the person.
One of the things we do as part of the European Code of Cancer Practice is actually provide questions for people to ask, because again, you hear it, and then all you hear is cancer, 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 and everything else goes out the window. So one of the things we felt would be very useful would provide practical questions that people can actually ask, so that they find out more about the cancer, but also what the options are, etc. And we found that very useful. And we're just at the moment producing a new version of the code, because we felt that there were a number of things that needed to be updated, which will be coming out towards the end of the year. But that recognition that it is difficult, there is a lot of information, and as well that you're in a scenario where you probably don't hear any of it at the start.
That's a really good point. I think I've seen that in multiple instances where, certainly with my father-in-law, family going in, a consultant with the doctor, they don't necessarily hear everything that gets said. And so one of the things that we had done was we accompanied my father with myself and my sisters to gather as much information as we could, because we knew that not everything would be processed and would go in at that time, and even taking notes. we took notes of what was being said.
It's really important because because it's a very daunting situation. I think people should never be on their own in those situations, and I think I'm a sort of a thing of saying you're having 3 or 4 people, not just one extra person, because again, some people are very good at in that situation saying, okay, I'm just going to be totally practical. I'm going to write down. I'm saying you were probably one of those.
We did go. Myself and my sisters were all very similar that way. But we did go mob-handed. I think when the consultant seen us coming in, he was kind of wondering, when does this stop? We were coming in. But do you think patients sometimes feel a bit powerless in the health system? Do you think?
I think they do, because one of the things, and it's an interesting concept that started in the States, which are called patient navigators. So the idea of actually having somebody who will take the patient through the whole process, navigate them through the system. Because I think it's very difficult. In some situations, you may have people who've never been in hospital before. This might be their first major engagement with the health system. I think as well, some of my colleagues who are brilliant, but sometimes they may talk in, techno speak that's very difficult to appreciate. So I think again, it's almost you need a data translator to actually making sure that it's very clear. And and the other thing is having patients involved in designing the literature that's provided. I think that's really important, because they'll look at it and say, what do people really want to know, need to know? Don't need to know everything at the start. What are the key things? And I think that's really important. So having the patient, advocacy groups involved with the hospital to provide the best possible information to you, so that you can then make an informed decision. And as I said, I'm a big believer in that informed decision being a partnership decision. Now, some people, different people will obviously respond in different ways, but I think providing the opportunity to, gain as much knowledge as possible. But that needs to be done in bite-sized pieces, because if it's all done up front, it'll just completely overwhelm people who are already in a very challenging situation because they've just heard they have cancer. And the problem is that in those scenarios, we really should be spending more time with the patient, but because of the sort of system in relation to the doctors and the healthcare professionals having to do so many different things, and this is where we come into this time saving, then brings them into being able to do the important things like talk to the patient. So again, it's and that's why I think that digital side will help us a lot in being able to sort of pull out the stuff that the doctor really doesn't need to be doing, to much more focus on the things he or she does need to be doing.
And have you ever sort of met a patient where you thought, do you know what, we or the system has failed you? I mean, I know this is quite a strong question.
I mean, certainly relations of, I think, because obviously in certain scenarios, we've lost in terms of in that situation. And I think it's difficult, talking to loved ones, relations, because obviously that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives potentially. I think one of the things you have to recognise is that, and that's why it's really important to build up that rapport, because I think it's easier to have those conversations if you have a rapport with the patient or with the patient's sort of husband or wife or partner. And that's part of the situation. There has to be, and you need to think about the communication in that situation is a different communication than the communication in the starting place in terms of where a patient is diagnosed. And again, it's remembering all the time that this is a very difficult situation for the person, no matter whether the patient who has relapsed and now has secondary disease, which is probably not treatable, and to the wife or kid, who's going to lose their dad, and they're not easy conversations.
No, and just on that topic, you work in a difficult environment. You have these difficult issues to deal with. How does Mark actually step back and switch off? What do you do?
I love reading. I don't read as much as I like to. and then listening to music. So that would be, I'd go back, to the house and put on some music. Occasionally I'll watch Netflix as well if there's something on I want to see. And I find reading actually is part of the thing.
That's your joy.
Yeah. And then in terms of my main exercise is walking. So I'll walk out for a walk. In Dublin I have a dog, so I'll go out for a walk with the dog.
Nice.
But yeah, it is important to wind down, and similarly when you're on holidays, I read 5 books on holidays, which I haven't read five books in a row in a while.
That's impressive. Yeah.
But again, it's and yeah, you're probably in the back. You are keeping an eye on things, because obviously in the position I am, I need to keep an eye on things. But you do, I do find that allows me to. So it's whether it's walking, listening. I like walking and just thinking. I don't.
Likewise, yeah.
I don't. It's not that I need to get to there or there, or and then music is an important part of my life. So
what sort of music? We're sitting in the Waterfront Hall, and enlighten us now, Mark.
Fontaines DC are my favourite.
Love it, brilliant.
And I've quite an eclectic taste. I go to a lot of. I don't go to as many gigs as I used to.
Need to change that for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I need to come into the Waterfront more often. But it was great. And for example, there on Monday there, one of my friends is in a band called the Shamrogues.
Brilliant.
And he asked me to come in and sing a couple of songs and the things. So that was great crack. So I'm doing that a little bit as well.
So you would consider yourself a good singer then?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to judge other people. It's good enough to stand up, I guess, and sing.
And maybe we can touch on that actually, because maybe there's something you want to talk about that maybe some of your academic colleagues wouldn't necessarily know about in terms of the performances that you do.
Some of them probably know now because they've seen it, but probably a lot don't. So I actually do a one-man James Joyce show. And it's called Doctoring James Joyce. So it actually focuses on sort of medicine and science in his work, but it also talks about his writings. I sing songs in it. I tell stories. It's not an academic thing. It's a more and I've done that in Dublin, in London, Paris, Amsterdam, New York, Boston. So I do it a few times a year.
And where did that come about?
Actually through my uncle, who I mentioned, who was the community leader. He used to run a particular scheme where the people on the scheme used to do a particular piece of research and find out about some sort of literary thing or heritage thing, and then they'd produce a display at the end of every year. And I sort of suggested to my uncle it might be good to turn some of this into an actual performance and get them to perform. So that's where it started, and then we did that for about 6 or 7 years. And then unfortunately the community centre folded, but I took that as a one-man show, and I mostly do it for charity. And so mostly I'll say, if you have a charity, I have a show, we'll travel to everything.
That's brilliant. Where do you fit it in? It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a... I like doing things, okay?
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And at this stage of your life, what matters more to you now than 20 years ago, say? What are the things that
I suppose probably I'm more influenced now, and particularly in the sort of work that we've done in relation to policy. And I think that's probably been the big difference. Obviously, things like the right to be forgotten, things like providing the evidence in the House of Commons to show that England needed a national cancer plan, and they give me because they allow me to sort of really say, okay, here's something we do. It's evidence based, and that's one of the things I do is collect and dissect that evidence, but it's making a difference. Probably I wouldn't have been able to do that 20 years ago.
I know that there's people that will be listening to this and going, wow, like that man has made such a difference in his career, in his life. You mentioned influence. Who would be somebody that you think has influenced you and the person you've become?
Very, 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 just one person, Paddy Johnson.
Paddy Johnson.
So Paddy was the reason I came to Belfast. He was at that time the Professor of Oncology, so had the Johnson Cancer Research Centre. He was the reason I came. I originally came as a visiting professor, so I was here 1 day a week for 14 months. I used to get the train up from Dublin, the Enterprise, on a Tuesday evening, get a taxi out to Four Winds where Paddy lived with his family, have dinner with them, stay the night there, come in with him the next day, work that day. He was a phenomenal person. I still miss him. And I can even feel myself now.
Remarkable individual, but that's fantastic.
It was a privilege. And I guess he saw something in me. You were asking me that earlier. At that stage in my career, that made sense for me to come here. Yeah. And again, that was a serendipity, if you like. But yeah, he is the reason Northern Ireland is on the map in relation to cancer.
Wow, and
we're trying to step on his shoulders, if you like.
That's amazing, and a real privilege to call him out in this interview as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, he was incredible.
Paddy Johnson, amazing. And of course, you follow in his footsteps. And I think that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you need people like Paddy Johnson.
Completely.
You need people who are visionary, who take people with them, and have empathy.
That's really important, because that's what he did. And and as well as that, my colleague Dan Longley, who leads the Johnson Cancer Research Centre, a lot of what we're doing together is that saying, this is what Paddy did, we're now taking that legacy and bringing it to the next stage.
That's amazing. I'm really glad that we've touched on that. So you spent 30 years in this space trying to progress. What would you think success really looks like for you in terms of where this gets to? What's success? At what point do you think, I'm content?
I think you're always looking at what's the next thing you can do. I think if I can get the right to be forgotten into the UK and Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, I think that'll be, I'd say, okay, that's made a huge difference. Mm-hmm. If you look in Northern Ireland, there are 117,000 cancer survivors. This can potentially make a difference to all of them.
117.
But if I think of that in terms of the UK, it's obviously going to be, 10 to 20 times more than that. So I think if we can do that together, I think that would be something to say, that made a real difference. I think it is making a real difference in Ireland, but one of my philosophies is cancer knows no borders. No. So if people in Ireland, so if Mary from Ballina can now go and buy that little cottage that she wanted in the west of Ireland, but Maria from Bangor can't even get a quote for her travel insurance to go and visit her daughter in New Zealand on a once-in-a-lifetime trip, something's wrong.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to stop until that wrong is righted.
That's amazing. What an ambition. Talk to me about 70-35. So this is the concept of having 70% survival rate by 2035 from cancer. Is that realistic?
Yeah, I think it is. And in fact, at the moment, we're doing an analysis to see where we are, because obviously we published that a number of years ago now, and we've sort of set road marks in terms of where we need to be at, sort of 2030. So we decided 2026 we would look at it. We look like the data is still a little bit, needs to be sort of evaluated a little bit more, but it certainly looks like we're on the right track. We did it because we felt we needed to set a target, but we also did what we did was first what we said was, well, we actually need to do an analysis to see to predict what would be possible. So rather than saying 70-35 is a dead of the sky, it's actually based on data analysis and sort of. We feel that we can achieve it, and if we can achieve that, I think that would be a huge benefit.
I think people will, hear this and go, I didn't know about that. I hadn't even, certainly when I was doing my research for this discussion, that popped up, and I really didn't know about it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's probably partially our fault. I think we need to get it out there more. And one of the things, because it's linked into the European Code of Cancer Practice, so one of the things we're going to do is when we launch the new code, the new version of the code, one of the key things will be that 70-35 vision and making sure that people are aware of it. So I agree with you. I don't think we've done enough to get it out there into the general population. So obviously this will help. And
do you think we'll reach a point where when you're given a cancer diagnosis, there won't be the same fear with it, because people will have such confidence in the system, in the technology, in the science?
I certainly hope so. I think we're gonna, obviously the sort of push in the community is, make cancer a chronic disease so that it's like other diseases that we treat normally. I think cancer still has the ability to fight back at us, so I think we need to be very much determined to keep on the road that we're on. But I could see a situation in the next 10 years where a lot more cancers are cured, and we've got a much better cancer prevention strategy. We're seeing, and we have to balance that. So we've got the prevention as against, obviously it's mostly an aging condition. So obviously our population are getting older, so we're going to see higher numbers of cancer. And the key is, how can we intervene as early as possible? I sometimes call it, how do we intercept cancer?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can intercept cancer at that early stage, then I think we'll be in a good. And the more cancers we can intercept at that earlier stage, I think the better position we'll be in, including achieving the 70-35 target.
Fantastic. And so, Mark, when all's said and done, what would you like your Encore to be?
I made a difference.
Yeah.
I think that if people feel I made a difference, that's
enough for you.
Yeah, that's enough for me.
I think it's reasonable to conclude that you have made a phenomenal difference, and you're a very humble man. I know that from meeting you on various occasions, but I do hope you continue to do what you do, and that you get those achievements and close those things out in terms of all of the various objectives that you've set. Lots of very big ambitions.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure being here. And as Neil Young said, rust never sleeps.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark. Absolute pleasure to have you on the Encore Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.